Hey guys, how you going? This is Billy Eat World again. Thanks for stopping by, and just remember, if you like what you see, don't forget to hit that like button. Also, feel free to take a look at some of my other Battlefield 4 videos if you like. You can find them all in a playlist in the description down below. But anyway, today we're going to be taking a look at the story of Bravo 20, which is something I covered way back when I first started this channel. And in fact, the last time I told you guys part of this story was in my first ever loadout on the British SAS. This time though, I want to go a bit more into detail because it's got to be up there with some of the most famous stories in modern military history. And for a long time, it was actually probably the most famous because it was the subject of the controversial best-selling book, Bravo 20 by Andy McNab. So what's so special about this book? Well, Andy McNab is actually the pseudonym of Sergeant Stephen Mitchell, the patrol leader on the operation. And so the reason this book gained so much recognition was because it was one of the only detailed first-hand accounts of an actual SAS operation. In 1999, the story was even made into a miniseries starring Sean Bean, which I must admit is pretty over-exaggerated. But even so, it was still pretty crazy for the time, because until Black Hawk Down came out in 2001, it was fairly uncommon to see movies that covered real SOF operations. But anyway, to get started, what is Bravo 20 anyway? Well, in a nutshell, it was the call sign of an 8-man SAS patrol from B Squadron 22 SAS. In fact, as you can tell from their name, they were actually the second of 3 similar teams deployed to Saudi Arabia in the build-up to the Gulf War. Shortly after the beginning of Operation Desert Storm, the coalition invasion of Kuwait, Bravo 20 were to be deployed into Iraq. And it was here, well behind enemy lines, that they were given the task of gathering intelligence, as well as destroying Iraqi Scud missile launchers. On the night of the 22nd of January 1991, the team was inserted into Iraqi territory by an RAF Chinook helicopter. They had also initially intended to bring along a Land Rover for transport as well, but to avoid arousing suspicion, they decided to leave it behind. This meant that the patrol had to travel everywhere on foot, which was made even slower as they could only operate at night to avoid being seen. And this meant that during the day, they basically had to hide out in a concealed observation position, which they set up around 20 kilometres from the insertion zone. Now, although their initial insertion had gone smoothly, problems began to arise when the team discovered its radio equipment wasn't working properly. So this basically meant that the team wasn't able to communicate with their HQ, which would make extraction more difficult. What the team didn't realise at the time was that this problem would become a lot worse, because on the afternoon of the 24th of January, the patrol was discovered by a local shepherd boy. And although the patrol did their best to stop him, he was able to get away, and he went and told some Iraqi forces that were stationed nearby. Knowing they'd been compromised, Bravo 20 began to withdraw, but it wasn't long before they heard the sound of a tracked vehicle. They were armed with law rockets, so they could repel an assault from light armoured vehicles, but they didn't really know what to expect. As it turned out, the vehicle wasn't a tank at all, but a local bulldozer, which again spotted the team before it got away. So this meant that the Iraqi forces now had a fairly good idea of what direction the patrol was heading, which meant it wasn't long before they caught up. Now, as well trained as the British SAS are, there's only so much an 8-man patrol with only small arms can withstand, and so the patrol knew they were outnumbered when the Iraqi forces attacked with at least one armoured car, followed by a lot of infantry. With that being said, due to their superior training, the SAS troopers repelled the assault without any British casualties. And on the other hand, according to Stephen Mitchell in his book, Iraqi casualties numbered as high as 250 killed or wounded. Whether or not this figure is actually correct has always been fairly controversial, but it is safe to say that the patrol repelled a much larger force, and because of this they were able to make it to their emergency evacuation point, but the problem was, the helicopter never arrived. What the patrol didn't know at the time was that due to illness the pilot had to abort the scheduled evac mission and return to base, and with enemy forces searching for them they couldn't exactly hang about, so the decision was made that they would try for the Syrian border instead. Now, the biggest problem with trying to get to the Syrian border was that it was over 290 kilometres away across harsh desert country, and like I said, to avoid being discovered, the patrol was only able to travel at night, which meant it was also very dark and very cold. In fact, it was so dark that while attempting to signal a friendly aircraft, the patrol was separated and never managed to find each other again. And also, it was so cold that by the evening of the 25th of January, one of the troopers, David Phillips, was starting to suffer from hypothermia. Later that night, Phillips' behaviour became erratic, which led to him being separated from the other members of his group, Mal McGowan and Chris Ryan. And after searching for over 20 minutes, McGowan and Ryan were forced to continue, so as a result, Phillips is presumed to have died of exposure sometime that night. At around midday the next day, the group is said to have split up again when McGowan headed off with a local shepherd to find a vehicle. And sure enough, they did find one at a local hut, but it was here that he was attacked and captured by at least a half a dozen armed local men. Now, meanwhile, the other group led by Sergeant Mitchell were also attempting to find a vehicle. And sometime on the evening of the 26th of January, they're said to have commandeered a car which they thought at the time was a taxi. They were driven by a local Iraqi to a checkpoint, but here they were forced to continue on foot when he alerted nearby police. And shortly after that, at around 2 in the morning, they were confronted by local police and armed civilians, and a firefight broke out. One of the troopers, Bob Consiglio, was shot and killed in this firefight, and although the others did get away, they didn't get very far. Trooper Stephen Lane died of hypothermia while trying to swim across the Euphrates River, and the rest were captured by Iraqi forces. They would all remain in Iraqi custody until they were released on the 5th of March, which meant the only member of the patrol to actually reach the border was Chris Ryan. And so still to this day, this unbelievable feat of endurance remains the longest escape in the history of the British Armed Forces, and probably the world. Now, you'd think that this pretty much ends the story of Bravo 20, but the fact is, like I said before, a lot of the details of the story are pretty controversial. And that's mainly due to the fact that SAS operations are so secret, and also because memory can be pretty unreliable in combat. So, in other words, you might hear something in this video that completely contradicts something else you've heard in another source. And that's literally because there's so many differing sources out there, including a number of books written by the troopers themselves. The good news is though, if you want to learn more about this operation yourself, there is a lot of content out there in addition to Mitchell's Bravo 20. So if you want to get the whole story, I'd recommend you check out a few different sources, and then you can make up your own mind. The fact is though, the nature of special operations is that we'll probably never actually know exactly what happened. But with that being said, even though I can't personally confirm that this is all 100% accurate, I think this video is a pretty good summary of how things went down. But anyway guys, that just about wraps up this video, so let me know what you think in the comments section below, and as always, if you like what you see, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. Also check out the links in the description below if you want to see any more of my videos, or if you want to support my channel on Patreon, and until next time, see you later, and have a good one.